Hey there, everyone. I am answering a specific question that I got from a student about how to practice with a wrist injury. So I've actually been asked this question 3 times and probably about the last week or so. So I wanted to take some time to answer it. Now, the first thing that I want to tell you is that I had a wrist injury that lasted a really long time. I actually went to PT for it for months, and it ended up healing mostly on its own. Of course, I did some massage for it, but it did eventually clear up. Now, the truth is that wrist injuries are pretty common in yoga. It's just something that happens with all the pushing that we do. Now, let's think about that for a second. We do a lot of pushing in yoga. Chaturanga, up dog, down dog, handstands, bakasana, push, 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 push. So it only makes sense, a little bit counterintuitive, but then you start to think about it with all this pushing that you do in yoga. Do you know what makes sense? It makes sense to hang. You literally need to hang to help your wrists. Do the opposite. So what I would do is when walking my dog and I walk to a park, I would literally hang on the mountain monkey bars with the little kids and get that stretch for my wrist so that it would have the opposite effect that I normally have in my practice on it. And that helps me quite a lot. So my first suggestion is to hang, to do the opposite, and see if that helps you at all with your wrist injury. Let's talk about some more practical stuff in practice. So there's a lot of pushing involved in practice. How do you keep practicing Ashtanga through a wrist injury? I would say you do some modifications. First thing I would suggest is modifying your sun salutations. I would personally do 3 times Ekam Dvai Trini instead of the full sun salutation. So instead of a full sun salutation, I'm talking about like inhaling up, exhaling, folding, inhaling head up, exhaling, folding, inhaling all the way back up, exhale, Samastitihi. Do that 3 times. You could do it more if you want, and have that take the place of a few of your sun salutations, because the sun salutations are more pushing, obviously. Modifying for the wrist injury is a little bit more challenging because you're on your wrists a lot. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of pushing, but you can always do your sun salutations on your forearms, and the forearms are a really good place to do that. So just drop down onto your forearms, hold forearm plank, do a cobra or a sphinx pose here, and you can even do down dog on your forearms. Push back, do down dog on the forearms. So you can still do a lot of the sun salutation that way. The next suggestion I have is to elevate the wrist a little bit. So instead of pushing straight down at a 90-degree angle in your wrist, lift the heel of the wrist up so you're pushing a little bit more at an angle. The simplest way to do this is to fold the mat a couple of times so that you get a little roll on your mat. Put the heel of the hand on the roll so the fingertips are on the floor, and that relieves a lot of pressure from the wrist because you're not at this angle. So part of the problem with the wrists is that it's about a 90-degree angle that you're at a lot of the times here. Like you're pushing down the floor, your wrist looks like this. That's a really intense angle. So by lessening it, or I think you're actually making more of an obtuse angle, a bigger angle, by lifting the heel of the hand, that helps the wrist a lot. Other things that help the wrist would be to, so not only do you lift the heel of the hand up, but you could, again, do your sun salutations on the forearms. That's going to help. Up dog on the forearms. Now think about this though. Full body integration. So when you're in a plank, you don't start hanging your weight in a plank. You push away. So this happens. I notice this all the time when I'm teaching, is that people are in a plank and they're letting the weight hang. They're not pushing the mat away. When you let the weight hang like that, it further aggravates the wrist. You're just letting the whole weight of your body hang into these tiny little bones of your wrist. You need to integrate your core. You need to integrate your back as you push away. And that leads to a more integrated plank pose, a more integrated chaturanga pose, and that helps lift you up out of the wrist. So if you're just kind of hanging in those postures, that actually hurts the wrist. You don't want to do that. So think about pushing away and really engaging everything so that it's less work on the wrist, more work in the rest of the body. So that's the next thing. I would say if your wrist hurts, you're just going to want to avoid postures like Bakasana, avoid Mayurasana. They're just too intense in the wrist. You do need to let things heal when you are injured. You can go ahead and ask your questions in the comments. I'll answer them if I know the answer for sure. So staying super engaged helps. Avoiding postures like Bakasana or Mayurasana that hurt you. You can change it up, right? Like you could do something instead of those postures that might hurt you less or not hurt at all, ideally. So you modify. In terms of there's so many jump throughs, jump backs, you can change that too. You don't have to do every single jump through and jump back. Again, modify. Skip some. Do realize that if you're skipping lots of jump throughs and jump backs, you might not get as warm. So you're going to want to kind of adapt your practice accordingly, but absolutely change that too. And then let's see here. What the other thing that I want to give you as an option would be to skip some of those vinyasas, do things on the forearms, lift everything else away, keep the hand fully engaged. So I think sometimes people are kind of more like this. That can kind of, you really want to push into the entire hand and use these bigger muscle groups. Sometimes I see people do their vinyasas on their fists like this. I don't actually like that. I don't teach that. I don't suggest it. I would rather see you rest and give things a chance to heal. And like I mentioned before, doing the opposite movement, like hanging, might actually really help you. And it's definitely worth checking into. And then I see the question here. It says, okay, so before moving to the US, I don't remember pressing all palm down. Can you be more specific? Because I'm not entirely positive what you're talking about there. I actually can't see your name. Because I'm not in Facebook, I'm in StreamYard, I'm in a third party, so I can't see who's asking these questions. But go ahead and try to be a little bit more specific, and I'll try. And lifting the palm in many poses, palm down, or special postures so you don't pressure so much on the wrist. So I see people in their fingertips and lifting the palm. Okay. So, and so is this helping you or hurting you? I think that keeping the entire hand engaged on the mat is better. Like there's a little hand bandha that you can kind of like sense the sensation through. But I teach the whole hand engaged, like you sometimes see, like the fingers kind of creeping up or whatever. But I think it makes sense in my mind to have a stronger and more complete foundation and then lift up out of that foundation. But I'm not sure that is answering your question. Correct. Trikonasana, you do not, okay, in Ashtanga, in Trikonasana, if you're practicing it traditionally, you would not put the palm down. You would catch the big toe and lift up. And I think it's important if you're talking headstands, the 7 heads, any kind of headstand, if you're talking handstand, even if you're talking about down dog, plank, chaturanga, use the whole hand. And again, if it's hurting, elevate the heel of the hand. Like that's, and they even sell those little yoga wedges. Those little yoga wedges are awesome. They're awesome. They help. They give you more space. They help you. So, Bakasana, it might be a little bit hard to use one of those wedges, but those wedges are awesome. You just put it right underneath your mat, and you can do it that, like, it really relieves the wrist. And I think that, a lot of the times you might see like the fancy version on the fingertips of doing stuff, but I would say typically like that I think is a little bit more of something that you would kind of play around with. It is not something that is traditionally taught in Ashtanga. And I advocate for using the whole hand because it's going to give you more of a lift.
push that entire palm down into the mat, and then do not hang your weight in it. And I think that that can happen in any of these poses you just listed, Bakasana, Titibasana. If you're not engaging the back, the core, the shoulder girdle, that weight is dumping into the wrist, and that makes it super easy to injure the wrist. So think about those bigger muscle groups, get those bigger muscle groups working so that you're not relying on the wrist so much, because that's not really what the wrists are designed for, right? Like they're not designed to carry the entire weight of your body. You want to use the rest of your body, core, shoulder girdle, back muscles. Like that is what's lifting you in these postures. And I think typically wrist injuries are super common when people are brand new to yoga, because again, it's a lot of repetition. You're doing those planks, you're doing those chaturangas, you're doing those same movements. And if you're not doing them right, which of course a lot of newer students aren't, I mean, a lot of more experienced students also aren't doing them right, but it's more common with newer students, right? That weight just crushes the wrists. You want to consider alignment too, because sometimes alignment, when the shoulder, like the alignment might be off, and that could be making this angle at the wrist even more acute than it needs to be. Like, it's like super crushing. So you want to get the alignment right, and especially those poses that you do again and again and again. Again, I'm talking about chaturanga, plank, up dog. Like these things can be super bad for the wrist. And then the hanging, like if you're, okay, so I'm trying to look at these comments here. Verbal cues for engaging the core. I usually just tell somebody Uddiyana Bandha or tone your low belly, navel to spine. So I think that might help. Those are kind of okay, Danielle, I see your name now. Yeah, so next time register with StreamYard. They don't like spam you or anything, and then your comments pop up right in this video. So yeah, engage core, engage, like that type of stuff is super good for it. I'm trying to think what else. Hanging, but that would be outside of practice, because there's literally no hanging that you can do in yoga, at least not from your hands, or at least not without a partner. And then yeah, keep that everything pushing down into the mat. Everything else is super engaged. And in terms of verbal cues for engaging the core, I would say tone the low belly, Uddiyana Bandha, navel to spine, that type of thing. Sometimes I'll tell people to hug their midline, hug the midline right up and down. And if you're looking for more cues about engaging the core, if you go to the link in the bio here, I have some free Pilates classes, and those are, that's where I cue engaging the core, right? So you could listen to that and listen to what I say there to get some ideas. In terms of studying with me, I'm opening up registration for Ashtanga Central this month. And that's the best place to study with me, because I'm there all the time teaching. So, and then let me look at this question again. So Titibasana, you're actually lifting the pelvic floor and shoulder blades. Yeah, I mean, in Titibasana, that's a really good question, Daniela, because you see it all different ways, and you definitely see it where people's legs are straight up and like the weight's kind of dropping down more. I don't teach it that way. I teach it a little bit more of an engaged version of it, because I think that makes sense in the context of the rest of the Ashtanga practice. So like I would, I mean, you can see in the Ashtanga for All Facebook group, like that's me and Titibasana at the top. So I'm a little bit more lifted. Because I like that engagement. But typically, being engaged and lifting is going to lift you up out of the foundation. And lifting up out of the foundation kind of makes everything a little bit stronger. And lifting up out of the foundation in a lot of poses is going to help the wrists. And then, like the question I specifically got was somebody saying that, she's working on third series. So third series, if you have a wrist injury, is particularly hard because there's a lot of arm balances, and arm balances with wrist injuries, they're very difficult. So the wedge can be helpful with that. Again, the wedge, like look it up, get one. They're really good for it. The other thing that can be helpful is hanging. And I mean hanging outside of practice, like walk your dog to a park, go to the kids' jungle gyms and hang, because it's the opposite of what we do in yoga. And it kind of sounds funny at first to think of hanging, and then you think about it and like, oh, I spent all this time pushing. So actually like hanging really makes a lot of sense. Okay. I think I blabbed on long enough about wrists. I hope that was helpful. Any injury though, like read that blog that I just posted here, how to practice when it hurts. Focus on what you can do, modify as much as you can, and get creative, right? Like if your wrist hurts, then maybe you want to pull pieces of different series together. When my wrists were bothering me a lot, like I mentioned, I was in PT for months for my wrists. I did a lot of second series because it was easier on my wrist. And it helped me heal. And, ultimately, like you want to get better. And the body does have this remarkable ability to heal. And it also has this remarkable ability to remember what you already learned. And one of the things I've noticed as a teacher is that so often people are so scared of losing postures. They don't want to rest because they're afraid they're going to lose the pose that they work so hard for. And I can tell you, every person I've ever worked with has not lost the pose. The poses come back. They come back, the body has this remarkable ability to remember, your muscles have memories, and, very, very rarely has anyone ever completely lost a pose. And I know that there's a lot of fear around that because, like I said, you work super hard for it. You don't want to stop doing it because you're afraid you're going to lose it, but rarely does that happen. And so it's much more beneficial to actually rest when you need to rest. All right. If there are no more questions, then I'm going to sign out. No doesn't work like this? What does that mean? Okay. Right, asana is not like that. Exactly. Yeah. The body remembers. Like, trust your body. Trust the work that you put in. Trust it. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for being here with me. I will see you very soon. Bye. Thank you.